Welcome to the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Join us each week as we sit down with the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management and author of Your Fiscal Physical, Ryan Nelson. Tune in to gain valuable insights and practical tips as we simplify complex financial concepts into digestible lessons. From budgeting to retirement planning, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering financial literacy.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Fiscal Physical Podcast. My name is Aaron. I am joined by Ryan Nelson. Ryan, what is up with you today, my man?
Not too much. What's up with you?
You know, just surviving. You know, staying alive, keeping things moving, and as always, enjoying being here, learning some fiscal physical tips. That it gets harder to say every time. I feel like maybe we should look at changing the name of this podcast. But once again, want to shout out, as I do with every episode, or I try to at least. Thank you so much for everybody who tunes in, listens, throws out questions, comments, whatever it might be. We really appreciate it. Wherever you might be joining us in the United States, internationally, however you might be getting us, please continue to like, subscribe, give us feedback. We'd love it all for sure. But today, Ryan, we are going to dive into your book. I've plugged it many a time on this here, so I feel like that's beating a dead horse. But there is an awesome section on this that I was reading the other night. It's just a little blurb. I almost feel like it could have been more expansive in here. Maybe part 2 you'll dive into that. But it's called Focus on What Matters. And in this section, you give some pretty logical information that, like, when we talk about it, people are going to be like, "Oh yeah, of course, that makes complete sense as far as that goes." But you mentioned like controlling what you can control, and you talk about common distractions and such too. So I'm curious if you could give a little bit of a breakdown to the listeners about this topic and what the best way you can kind of explain this and how to achieve this goal on focusing on what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, like you said, I mean, it's maybe semi self-explanatory, or it feels obvious when when you hear it, but it's one of those things that, while obvious when you hear it, sometimes we don't always think about it. Right. And so the way in the book, I have that little image of the Venn diagram that I love. But so if you can picture this, if you're listening, if you can picture this, it's a Venn diagram, which maybe half of our listeners know what that means. Yeah. No, our listeners are
they're incredibly smart.
But so a Venn diagram is that thing where you have the two circles overlapping. And so in one circle is like things that you can control, and in the other circle is things that are important, right? And then so where the overlap is would be both things that are both important and are in our control, right? And really the idea of this is what we want to spend our time focusing on is the things that are important and the things that we can control. And I like draw this Venn diagram probably like every single day and like bring this up to clients. Yeah, like almost every meeting, I feel like.
Excellent. You hand draw it? Do you have like?
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. Nice.
Yeah, I had to just rip off the top sheet of my little notepad. It's got it in my desk.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So again, it's just about focusing on things that are important and things that you can control. Again, on the surface, everybody's probably like, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, duh.
Yeah. But what's interesting, it's like, what about market returns? You can't control market returns.
Sure.
So like that's one thing that probably everybody cares about and spends a lot of time. That's probably the number one thing people like focus on is what are my returns? It's like, that's something we can't control. Like, do we really want to spend our time together talking about returns? Like that's completely out of our control. One example of something we can control is return. I mean, sorry, is risk. Sorry.
Right.
So something that's important, the way I think about this is if we were to prioritize everything that's both important and that we can control, risk is probably nearer at the top of that list. And so we can figure out what the right amount of risk to take in our portfolio is. And the returns are a function of the amount of risk we take, right? So we want to focus on risk, not returns. We'd be focusing on risk. And then again, the returns are a function of the risk. So the returns are something we can't control, but is a function of something we can control. So we want to spend as much time and energy focusing on what we can control, right?
Right, definitely.
And also, another example of this is when it comes to portfolio construction. So when we're building our portfolio, we're deciding what to invest in. You'll remember we talked in episode 53 about modern portfolio theory. So modern portfolio theory, I recommend anybody go back and listen to that one. It's probably one of my favorite episodes. That's episode number 53. It talks about how to build a portfolio and how the diversification of that portfolio, basically how you could partner two or more investments together, increase the return and increase expected return and reduce expected risk, right? It sounds like that would be impossible to do. It's not. If you use non-correlated assets, you can reduce the overall risk of a portfolio.
Yeah, it's kind of like I remember that episode, I was like, this is like a glitch, or this is like a hack. Like if executed correctly and things go right, obviously some things out of the, but you're like, wait a minute, this seems like a great idea. Why
feels counterintuitive? It's just a basic mathematical principle, so it's nothing like weird. But it's counterintuitive, which is what makes it feel like that, like hack, right? So it's nothing weird or out of the ordinary. Again, it's just counterintuitive. But so again, modern portfolio theory. That's something building and constructing our portfolio. If we're building and constructing our portfolio, we can adequately apply the principles of modern portfolio theory. That's something that's important and we can control. Then, or you could focus on, hey, I want to buy this hot AI stock, or I want to buy Bitcoin, or I want to buy whatever sexy stock I heard about in the market or on the news yesterday, right? I would tell you that you can control that. You can control what individual stock you buy, but I would argue it's not important. Constructing a diversified, well put together portfolio that complies with modern portfolio theory that's what's important. Individual security selection, or like trying to catch the next cool thing,
right? Yep.
That is not important, right? And so again, even though again, it's probably obvious to everybody that we want to focus on things that are important and that are in our control. Sometimes what's not so obvious is what are the things that are important? Yeah. And what are the things that are in our control? Most people might think returns are in our control, but no, we just learned they're not. Risk is in our control. Returns are a function of that risk. We might think that, it's important to pick the right stocks. I would argue it's not important to pick the individual security selection. It's important to compose a portfolio basically the right way. So again, it can kind of be a little bit counterintuitive, but again, at the end of the day, I think we just want to be focusing on those things that are important and that we can control.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fabulous breakdown of that, and it's, you hit on it. If like sometimes these things that maybe are obvious until like you're like, oh yeah, of course. Then you're like people are like, oh, drink more water. You're like, oh, of course.
Sure.
And it's like, maybe I actually should drink more water, and actually implementing it, I think, is a big piece of it. And I'm so excited that you used that Venn diagram, because when I came across it, I was like, wow, this is awesome. And I think that like I use it at my work as well too, because I think it's very applicable.
Oh, it's applicable to all of life,
everything. Right? In general, you're just like, because you're like, and I just have a little thing I found on Google that I just pull up, and I'm like, here it is. Like,
nice.
I don't actually draw it, so I'm glad that you hand draw it. That's awesome. But I think that it's really important because I'm sure you get that question all the time of like,
absolutely,
cool, what are your returns? Like, or like, how do I get my returns more? What can I do to increase this? And you're like, I'm sure it's probably just robotic now that you just have like
to some degree, right?
To some degree, you have like your answer of this. But once people start to understand that, I'm sure it's a lot easier for them to kind of accept, not get so worried about when things go up and down or whatever it might be with returns or the market in general. Because like if you're not chasing that next hot thing, and you're just focused on staying the course, if you will, like I feel like it just makes things overall easier.
One interesting, I'm just thinking of this on the spot, so the example probably won't be that good, maybe even not that relevant. But
perfect,
you can cut it. You can cut it out. Yeah.
I won't.
But but so imagine. So let me just ask you a question.
Sure.
Should you contribute to your 401k?
I would say yes.
Yeah, I'm setting you up for
failure. Yes, definitely. Yeah, I would say yes. I would say like yes. I should contribute to my 401k but I also think, is there an employer match to it? Like these different things that kind of go into it, I guess.
So let's pretend we have somebody sitting across the desk from us. Whatever.
Sure.
Hypothetical client A. Should hypothetical client A contribute to their 401k?
I would say yes. That would be my guess. As far as this goes.
So what I think is interesting, if we apply the same topic, we think about what's important and what you can control. One of the most important things that I would say we would want to do is figure out what their goals are.
Right.
So if we talk to them and they say, I want to retire at age 65, I'm okay saving 15% of my income. I want to retire at age 65. And, I don't expect any inheritance or anything. You might say, yeah, this person's a perfect candidate for a 401k. Let's get you contributed, right?
Right.
And we're using information that, like, one of the most important things is what is their goal, right? So if we were to, again, to prioritize what's important and what can we control, what's important is what their goal is, and we can control basically how we react to that. Now you can sit with another client, and if another client says, hey, I come from a really wealthy family. I have a trust set up. I'm going to inherit, $10 million at age 65, basically as my retirement savings. But I don't want to retire at age 65. I want to retire at age 45, right? And now all of a sudden, if they were saving into a 401k, well, they don't have access to any of their family's funds until 65.
Right.
They don't have access really. For purposes of this conversation, we'll say there's some exceptions to this, but they don't have access to their now 401k funds until 59 and a half.
Right.
If they said they want to retire at 45, what are they doing between 45 and 59 and a half? Right. So that'd be another example of a client where it's the same question, but what's important is their goals and where they're at currently financially. And so once we determine that, we can say, okay, for this person, maybe they shouldn't put any money into a 401k and they should be saving it all in like a brokerage account so they can access that money before age 59 and a half without penalty. And then they can transition smoothly into receiving their basically family wealth. Right. So it's just interesting how figuring out, like, again, focusing on what's important. Some of the most important things would be your goals, right? Building a diversified portfolio, so you're applying modern portfolio theory. Whereas some unimportant, focusing on your risk. Whereas some unimportant things would be, are you investing in Coke versus Pepsi, or are you investing in Ford versus Tesla? Like in the grand scheme of things, that probably actually isn't going to matter nearly as much.
Right.
That individual, if he had invested all his money in whatever Tesla, and Tesla ends up being the better choice, but he put it all into a 401k. That's not going to help him retire. Right. Yeah. So he was focusing on something that wasn't important.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I think it's super well said and a super great breakdown. It's really good to hear, and we've mentioned it multiple times on this, that Alchemy Wealth Management yourself is a fiduciary to do like what's best for the client, and to ask those questions and to figure out what those goals are versus, like, you never want to throw any companies under the bus, but like what the company goals are specifically, and trying to balance those and like figure out, cool, what works best for you and how can we make that happen is not the most common, I would say. Like it happens, obviously you have it, but I feel like there's instances where there's more incentives for something to happen and you get someone into an account maybe they don't need, but being a fiduciary and like yourself, like thinking of starting at square one of what are your goals, what can we control, and how do we get there, I think is a big piece of what Alchemy Wealth Management's all about. And hopefully you guys, if you're doing something like that, you at least, even if you're doing it on your own, stop and ask those questions overall before you really start diving into, investing all your money into one thing or whatever it might be. So
for sure. And thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, that's all we had for this side of the podcast. We'll go ahead and pause here and be back on the other side.
And now, to put the personal in personal finance.
Welcome back to this side of the Fiscal Physical podcast. We are getting into some music today, Ryan. So I am really curious because you're kind of an enigma with music. I'm not really sure what you like just in general. Like I feel like you just find something that you're like, I like that, and it can be really whatever overall. So my question to you is, what's the first concert you ever attended?
I like it. I'm an enigma. Me and Aaron Rodgers.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
I don't listen to much music. Again, it's I like almost entirely just listen to podcasts. Listen to podcasts, listen to audiobooks. As I walk my dog now, I listen to like the Spanish training or whatever. So there's just not a lot of time then I guess left over for music. And so I've never been a huge music guy myself. I was trying to think of what my first concert I ever went to is, and I honestly can't remember. It was, I'm almost positive it was with my sister, and I think it was either Backstreet Boys or NSYNC. It was one of those, like,
one of those two,
those boy bands.
There's a huge rift between those two, so that's funny. You're like, it's one of these two. Like,
I thought they were like parallels. Too. Aren't they like super similar?
It's funny. They're very similar in their like kind of music, but like the following between like you're either an NSYNC fan or a Backstreet.
Can't be both.
generally you choose
Interesting.
one or the other.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's
Yeah, I
funny
didn't
that you
realize
mentioned that.
Yeah, so
I don't care, but like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
funny, We're gonna lose some listeners.
Yeah. Yeah, so I honestly I don't remember which one it was. I'm pretty sure it was one of them. It was one of those like bands. Yeah, it was something similar to that. And I don't even remember the concert at all. I would have been. Yeah, it was just a long time ago.
Yeah, that's funny because I think about I was when I wrote this I was like, oh, of course I'm super excited, and I was like, shoot, what was mine? Because I'm also not a big music guy in general. Like, it's caused many a rift between my wife and I when I'm like, I've never heard this song. She's like, you've never heard this song? Like, I feel like that's
I get that all the time.
That's like daily. I get that. Like, 'cause she's like, she hops in the car, she turns on either the radio or Spotify, whatever, and listens to music. I'll turn it on and either listen to like sports talk radio or a podcast or something like that, and that's just kind of where. And I'll maybe hear a song or something. I'm like, oh, that's kind of catchy. Like, oh, maybe listen to that. Like, but
I just usually listen to the physical on repeat. Just try to drive those listener numbers up.
Is that where we got all those listens from? Interesting. Yeah. But I was thinking about this, and I remembered what my first one was. Is in like I come from a pretty small town in Idaho, but the next town up does like this summer festival where they get like a decent amount of people there. Every once in a while, you get like a big name that comes out, and one of the names that I went, I think I was like maybe 12 or 13, and I was 12 or 13, something like that, and the Bare Naked Ladies were playing there, and I didn't know anything about them whatsoever.
You were intrigued, though.
I was very intrigued at 13. You can imagine that piqued my interest, to say the least. And I remember them like just playing, and then they wore like costumes of like naked ladies.
Oh, really?
like people in bikinis, and I was like, well, this is crazy. These are dudes, like kind of thing.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And so it was just like this.
So Bare Naked Ladies it's a guy, it's boy band.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so it was very interesting to me overall. Like I was like,
I would have assumed it was women.
Interesting. Like, and then later they came back like 6 or 7 years later to this thing, and I went again. Like it's a summer concert or whatever, and they're the ones, fun fact, they're the ones that if you've ever seen the show The Big Bang Theory, they do the intro, our whole universe was in a hot, and they played that like, oh, that's cool, like acoustically or whatever, and it just brought the house down then. Like, but when I was 12 or 13, that show wasn't out, so it didn't really, but then later when they came back, they were had like even a bigger following just for that like specific thing. So I'll just never forget, like my world was opened. Like that's awesome. So I might have gone to one before that or heard a musician play or whatever, but like that's the one that kind of stands out in my mind there for sure. So anyway, awesome. Appreciate it. Hope everybody's now thinking about what their first concert was, and appreciate everybody listening in, tuning in. And Ryan, any last words?
As always, stay the course.
Thank you for joining us for the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Until next time, happy listening. And as always, stay the course. If you have a question or topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com. If you enjoyed today's discussion, subscribe to the podcast to ensure you never miss an episode. And consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite platform. This helps other listeners like you find the show. For more resources, you can visit Alchemy Wealth Management's website at www.alchemywealth.com or find your Fiscal Physical, the book, on Amazon. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that personal finance is just that, personal. Please don't take anything we say as advice. The preceding content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not an offer or a solicitation, nor should it be construed or relied upon for tax, legal, or investment advice. It doesn't consider your personal financial situation or objectives and may not be suitable for you.